and the people that developed this country, talk about hardships. It was much worse than 8 to 13% inflation. Not to diminish what people are going through right now in any way, but we're not being attacked by marauders on the trail or losing a wagon wheel and starving in the desert or any of that stuff currently. At least no one that I know. So, and that, we come from a tough lineage. This country, Joe was just saying his grandfather came over when he was 12 years old. I think my grandfather was maybe a year older than that. Imagine starting your adult life at 13.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My grandpa did the same thing. My grandpa had a mean stepmother. He and his brother hitchhiked at 13 years old down to Pensacola, Florida, and started working at the shipyard at like 13 years old. I mean, that wasn't that long. That was 1925. I mean, some people think, oh, that's a long time ago. No, it wasn't. That was my grandfather. And like you're talking about your grandfathers, I mean, it's people we've known, and I knew my grandfather. Like, it's not like he's been dead for, like I didn't know him or anything of that nature. I mean, it's just someone that I knew. And when you look at the history of our country and how old our country is, look at that right there. Take my grandfather, born in 1912. So if he knew someone that was 100 years old when he was 10, well, that'd been 1822. We're not far off from our history when you apply that. I mean, we're not an old country at all. So, that's the things that people need to understand is that we've gone a long ways in such a little time, and we're not an old country. And but yeah, you're talking about perseverance and the things that people went through. I mean, these generations, especially younger than me, haven't been through hardly anything to comparison. My grandpa, the same grandpa, people used to say, "I wish I lived in the old days." He's like, "No, you don't." He used to say that all the time, like, "No, you don't." They were talking about air conditioning and things of that nature. And my grandpa's like, "No, you better be glad you're born now, because you really wouldn't want to be during a time you didn't have AC or heat and things of that nature."
Right on. I do want to say, SG, I believe you've entered the room. Is that correct?
That is correct. Sorry for my delay.
Oh, no apology needed. We are very excited to have you. And Scott and I talked about this at the start. You guys have never met, so we want to, please feel free to begin your conversation, and SG meet Derek Johnson, and Derek Johnson meet SG Anon. Please, gentlemen, take it away from here.
Well, I got to say, Derek, I really like and appreciate and respect your work, and I think you're connecting with a great deal of the American population. And I got to say, kudos, man. Very good job.
Well, I appreciate it. It's an honor to hear that. I've heard your name quite often, and of course, I'm guilty of not looking too much at different platforms and things of that nature. Just trying to keep my head to the grindstone of what I've been reading and what I know the sources to go to. But it's definitely an honor to be here with you, and honor to meet you and talk to you, and hopefully we'll get to meet someday in person.
Likewise. So, gentlemen, this might be a better way to go about this, unless Derek has something specific that he'd like to start out with. The better way might be to point us in a direction and then have us bounce points back and forth with various backgrounds and understandings.
Sure. Well, the last time we talked, we were anticipating Trump's latest speech, and it ended up being pretty low energy. And Derek and I were just talking about that. All of us were talking about that before you came on. But now that we've had that experience, Derek noticed a bunch of comms, and I think that might be a good place to start off. What was your interpretation of what took place from that speech?
My interpretation was that speech was a calculated military misdirection necessary in times of war. That speech it stood in such polarity to all of Trump's rallies that he's been holding now for nearly 2 years at this point, that there was no way there wasn't more at play. One of the things I picked up on, I think a lot of people picked up on it because it was a visual representation when there were 19 flags on that stage for a great deal of time in the afternoon. Additionally, saw some photographs of one of the flags, I believe it was on the left side, a group of 3. Those flags were topped with spears. My understanding is spears is representative of military justice, military tribunals or military courts martials having been convened for a higher purpose. Yes, go ahead.
Derek,
yeah. So, yeah. Well, and then too, paralleling that, with the military tribunals. If you go back to 2016, people were asking about President Trump had the military behind him. If you look at the braids on the top of the what we call a patrol cap or a cap, those were military intelligence and also JAG braids, so Judge Advocate General. So that's what those braids represented. I posted that today on Telegram, so if you want to look at that, she'll like the colors, or you can Google it. You can Google or whatever you use, DuckDuckGo, or all the different engines out there that people are using. But Judge Advocate General and then military intel. And, you know, the other thing that I like to talk about being a veteran is the fact that so many people, you know, just a few days ago, November 11th, was thanking us for our service, things of that nature. But, you know, when we try to tell people what's going on in the military that's not classified, things that are wide open, as JFK said, this is an open society, this is all open laws, open information. But when a veteran tries to tell you how the military works, and I'm the crazy one, I mean, that's what gets me the most, is the fact that all I'm doing is telling you what military laws and regulations and operations are, but also insignia, which is a very basic principle in the military, just insignias. But also they want to, you know, thank us for our service. But the other thing is this, is that how do we become the most elite military in the world? Don't you think it has something to do with intelligence? So, you know, that's the thing that I like to drive home the most when it comes to that, setting these things up to understand military thinks a whole lot different. As we said in the pre-show, the Military Justice Act tells you right off the bat what Congress says about the military. The military law is separate than civil law. Then you had the Law War Manual, was written 2015, and then it was updated December 2016. I mean, look at the timing of all this. So military occupancy is the first, it's like the umbrella. So it's like people need to understand everything under that umbrella. Yes, Congress knows. Yes, the governors know. Yes, everybody knows, to a level, depending on who's ratting who out and who's playing the, you know, I don't like to use the word infiltrator. I like to use the word strategic operations, but it depends on who's still, you know, operating what missions.
Did you notice the spears as well as being significant? I mean, was that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean that, you know, of course, there's also the eagle versus the phoenix. There's a lot of different things that you know can show you this throughout history. You know, of course, now, I mean, you know, who's the internet? Where's the internet? What's the internet? You can't Google some of these things anymore. You can't look up some of these things. You just have to know military personnel and understand the history of military with these certain, you know, what we call optics or things of that nature, even though the flag is a vital part of our history.
So if that speech was internal comms to a large degree, then what are we, the viewer, the civilian viewer, what are we to take away from it? I mean, what could be gleaned from it in terms of what this means for our near future?
Well, I think you got to understand that military occupancy first and foremost, because you won't pick up on the optics unless you know some of the language behind it. But you know, I wrote down 58. A buddy of mine said he heard 100. So I'm like, dude, I mean, I was Hawkeyeing it, and I'm like, dude, I don't see where you got 100 at. But you know, I mean, but that's military too. So we all, you know, there's always something different every time you look at something. But there were some very, very vital droppages in there, even one particular with the Law War Manual that pointed to a specific chapter in the Law War Manual that, why of all things, if Donald Trump is egotistical, let's just do that route. If Donald Trump has got a big ego, like some people out there want to just beat him up over, why of all things would he pick Angela Merkel and then also Germany? Why would he pick that as a topic of all things he could have chosen in that speech? Well, it's because there was a major optic drop behind that. And there was a few others that we can get into. I'll let him go now.
Well, I would agree with that. What we're to take away from that is that the commander in chief is in control. The United States National Guard, in conjunction with the JAG, Corps of the Navy, and the U.S. Air Force, have been cleaning up this world. They are running joint coordinated military operations worldwide. The commander in chief is very much on the pulse of the nation. The American people are proud and strong. We can take this. And Donald Trump knows that we can take this. And that's why we are enduring what we are enduring, because we have the brows and the shoulders and the strength of arm and the strength of heart to deal with what we are dealing with. That speech was necessary to move on to next phases. That speech was a coded message to the deep state that all bets are off. We are in it to win it. And if you are not with us, you are now officially against us from this point forward. Additionally, he announced that America's comeback started right now. I don't believe we took that as literally as he meant that. I think he meant the constitutional republic of the United States will now return to the world. This process is not instantaneous, but we have kicked it into afterburner, and we are, quite frankly, along for the ride.
So did you see my post today? I don't know if you see any of my stuff, but I thought that's pretty cool. You and I talk a lot about this separately now together, but the optics, how many coincidences do you need, as Q says, how many do you need? Well, today, a C-17 Globemaster or C-130, I have to go back and look, but it was a call sign, Elvis 68. I mean, what are the odds? And what's the coincidence is after 2 speeches this week, that was Tuesday night and Friday night, he had another speech where he said, as I said Tuesday night, America's comeback starts right now. What are the odds just a few days later that a call sign is Elvis 68? I mean, Elvis Presley, probably one of the greatest entertainers in the world that we know of. And then Elvis 68, his comeback, 68. The odds of that, it ain't there.
How many times before it is mathematically impossible? That is the nature of Q. We are experiencing the greatest dissemination of military intelligence and the greatest alignment of interest between we, the people of the world, and the capable warriors and all of the patriots in the militaries around the world that we will ever probably see in mankind's history. This is one of the most exciting times to be alive. I understand that everyone out there is frustrated and suffering, and they're having a hard time. I mean, heck, I've got a sick little one and a day job situation that I don't necessarily love, but I'm passionate about it and I enjoy it. But I still have to live within this matrix system, just like all of you out there and every one of us. But this is one of the greatest times to be drawing a breath, and don't let it slip you by. This will be the stuff that history books will talk about for generations to come.
Very well said. We Scott and I were wondering about the what's going on in Canada. We have a friend named Brad that has informed us that it's mandatory inoculations. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that they've basically handed over their sovereignty to the UN at this point. Things are looking pretty dire in Canada, and I'm wondering, how do we interpret that here?
My personal understanding, just from the research that I've done and the couple of messages I was able to swap with the gentleman I refer to as my mentor, the Canadian military seized power this past week in the background, and that government is now going down. We are go, no go for Canada at this point with the alliance, and they are full bore cleansing their military in preparations to cleanse their government. I'll turn it over to Derek to see if he's seen anything in other spheres.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, when you go read the Law of War Manual, it aligns with the World Alliance of Generals. So there's a lot of things that people, if they don't know about this already, they don't understand. And I don't mean this in a bad way. They can't understand, but a lot of people don't understand that this is a world alliance. It's not just President Trump versus Biden. This was not anything of that nature. It's a military occupancy from its full nature of the Law of War Manual, which is also coincides with the Military Justice Act of 2016. And then you go read it. It's a tough read. It really is. But you have to take all that plus all the executive orders that President Trump put into place for the U.S. and apply it, though, because even though that's the U.S., it also aligns with everybody else, too, because of what happened with him when he went to Saudi Arabia, North Korea, China, all the things that he did, Jerusalem being declared capital of Israel, all these things put together. There's just no way that he'd have been able to do some of the things like the 232 wins and 22 losses. The 22 losses are states that have the discrepancies once again. So, you take all these things, you put them in a blueprint. The same thing with Canada. I've been watching air traffic. I was watching a little bit today, different I was trying to see who was in Canada earlier. I do have someone, I can't remember who it was, but seems like Jordan or some country. I mean, there's a bunch of different countries in and out. So, you know, when you see this every single day and you watch these aircraft every single day, as I do, you can see the military occupancy, because what are all these countries doing? Nigeria, I think that's who it was in Canada this morning. I mean, you'd think in Nigeria's defense budget, are they able to fly that far? You know, and what are they doing in Canada? So when you look at some of these aircrafts and what kind of aircraft, the C-17 Glowmaster is a big aircraft. I mean, they cost about anywhere from $105,000 to $120,000 an hour to operate. So, you know, when you see that bigger picture, then you'll start to understand the military occupancy, and then read the Law of War Manual, where it talks about the UN Security Councils and different things of that nature, and how they apply, and know that the good guys are in control. And then it just, you know, it's not just the U.S. We're talking about, as he said, the alliance.
And what about, you know, with the current events that have unfolded in the last week with FTX and that being you know, showcased around the world, and is there other current updates that that you can inform people that you are privy to, that you're seeing that are either in the public eye or that you've noticed that we may not be as privy to?
Yeah, and FTX being the one of the, well, probably the single largest financial catastrophe you know, ever to occur, really. It implicates so many of these players. I mean, everything from key celebrities to you know, I mean, it trickles down to the Bidens. I mean, it just goes everywhere. I don't know if you follow the FTX situation, but it seems like a financial meltdown that's going to affect the whole globe. How does
well, FTX is one of the first phases of the full petrodollar market collapse. We have to cut off all of their avenues and channels, their little side deltas and tributaries that they have off of this worldwide market, before we can drop the central fold market, which is, of course, the central banking system, what we would call Wall Street, the big corporations, etc. The other thing that FTX does, and FTX was a multifold move, it was a phenomenal chess move on behalf of the alliance. It accomplished so many things. It set into motion a plan for the financial collapse of Ukraine, which means they will no longer be able to defend themselves against Russia. Not that they were able to anyway. They're having to be propped up with foreign help and foreign money. But now that we've cut off a significant portion of that foreign money and taken a lot of those assets back into our control, they're kind of foundering without much option. The other thing that it does is it catches a large majority of individuals in the United States government participating in this Manchurian Act that we're all watching in financial treason. That, while not necessarily a crime against humanity, is still a war crime in a time of war. Aiding and abetting the enemy includes funding the enemy. So, you know, this multifold move set into motion a lot of things. What we see from here on out, I don't know. But I would not be surprised if in a few weeks or a couple of months we start seeing the financial system either completely implode or rapidly accelerate to that degree and whip up those sleepers, that could be the scare event we've all been hearing of. I've heard nuclear, I've heard climate, it could be financial. What wakes the most people up? Their wallets are a very loud gong. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I think one of the more significant attributes to this FTX debacle is, you know, kind of like a Bill Gates charity. You know, the money was just making its big circle from the United States taxpayer to Ukraine, you know, through FTX, obviously in various roles, right back to the Democrat coffers.
A circle back, if you will.
Yeah, circle back.
Jen Psaki.
I mean, there were some Republicans, I think, that were also recipients, but I think rhino is the correct term for who got those funds. But yeah, how significant is that, and how do you think that's going to play out in the public eye?
Well, it highlights the uniparty.
Yeah,
it shows individuals that, or it shows the sleepers and the normies out there, that there is no honor, there is no I don't know what you would call it, maybe dignity to our system anymore. It really is just a giant pay for play. It's a casino. The other thing that it does is it sets into motion a chain of events that I don't believe is going to be missable, if I can use the word, by the general public. This is by far the largest singular collapse of wealth outside of a market crash that we've seen. This affected countries in Europe. This affected Ukraine. This affected most of the A-listers, many of whom are already gone. It affected the governments in England and the United States. It implicates France. We have a gentleman tied to FTX who's believed to be basically next of kin to the late Jay Epstein, who is not dead. This event was a very calculated, very effective chess move. We are collapsing their system at all different levels in all different areas. Derek's really good about highlighting that this is a worldwide war. It's also a worldwide interdimensional war. We have areas of society that are engaged in irregular warfare that are not typically militarized. We have to handle those very specifically. One of the ways to do that is to shift and move money. Reclamation of assets is a fantastic tactic in times of war if you can do it successfully.
It seems interesting that this is timed with the collapse of the petrodollar, arguably anyway. How devastating is that going to be when our economy finally catches up to the fact that we've got all these dollars coming home to roost? Because, from what I understand, at the G20, there's an awful lot of nations that are ready to sign on with the BRICS nations with their gold-backed currency, and that's definitely going to leave the American dollar out in the cold. How deep of a cut do you think that's going to make across our country?
Well, it's going to be a lesson that we won't soon forget. Understanding how money is valued is an enormous part of this journey. We all got had. We had no idea that we got had. Our money was never worth anything. It was only worth what the bank told us that it was worth on any given day, and that could be changed at the flip of a wrist. Learning how to understand fiat currency, to see these telltale signs, to ensure that it cannot be done to future generations is pivotal. How do we impart that level of a lesson into the consciousness of mankind? I think some sort of shocking event has to occur, be it as awful as, say, as getting locked out of your bank account, or your money suddenly vanishing from your bank account, or just a period of uncertainty, maybe for 7 to 10 days. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that this could play out, but we have to get people to realize that the control of money is the reason we are here. As long as we, the people in the free world, maintain control of our currency, this level of corruption and evil will never be possible ever again.
So I'd like to add to that really quick, to circle back around. No. Yeah, you will. This is awesome.
I gotta say, Derek, we do love your sense of humor. I love your knowledge, and you make us laugh, and we really appreciate you. So anyway, please go ahead.
I'm full of colloquials now. Don't get me started on that. And I had 2 grandpas and a dad that are full of them. So, just for the people out there to break it down even further, people always say, I want to see arrests. I want to see arrests. Well, sometimes it's better to let someone destroy their own system, right? Versus arresting them like that. Arresting them don't solve anything. If you make them destroy their own system, which is what military operation would be like. That's what you're watching, is you're watching the military trap all these people and making them destroy their own systems from within, and then their only safe place will actually be Guantanamo Bay. They'll actually want to be there because but
that's the only way they'll survive for the short term.
That's it. And the other thing is to talk about the system, the quantum system. You got this QFS. So Donald John Trump, 13885 executive order, also the Quantum Act, and then you can go to quantum.gov. It's got 21 agencies. All the military agencies are backing this. That was launched September 2021. Also the executive order 13959. You mentioned Bill Gates Foundation. Executive order 13959. Was it, hey, if you are using U.S. stocks or funds to fund the communist part, the Chinese military, communist Chinese military, then your assets will be frozen effective immediately. And then they'll have to obviously cipher through to see if you actually were doing this on purpose. Did you know about it? or were you innocently trading and didn't realize what you were doing? But when you look at when that went into effect, I mean, this is how specific Donald John Trump was and the 5D chess player. It said January 11th, 2021, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time was when it went into effect. I mean, you can't get any more specific than that in an order. And then immediately after that, we saw GameStop. We saw Jeff Bezos step down. When I was doing my master's degree in Colorado at Colorado State, when I did that, we were studying Jeff Bezos and how he wanted to take over the world market, the food market. He wanted to take over Walmart and be the leader in everything, every aspect. And he steps down for philanthropy reasons. Get out of here. Like, so there's that. Bill Gates and his wife announced divorce. Okay, well, if you know anything about law, Mississippi and Florida have two laws that are different than anywhere in the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you think you're about getting a divorce and you want to be dirty to your spouse, then Mississippi and Florida, you cannot take more than half. So it's why O.J. Simpson moved to Florida, because they couldn't take more than half. So there's that. Why would Bill Gates and his wife all of a sudden announce divorce? Then you had Warren Buffett leaving the Bill Gates Foundation. Then you had multiple CEOs. I mean, we're talking about 1,800 CEOs or counting. The last count I had was 1,500 CEOs who had stepped down. Also, every single day since that order, Zuckerberg had dumped $25 million in stock every single day. I have those links in my documents where you can go actual to credible stock exchange and see him dropping these 25 million a day in stock. So, you know, there's things out there. It is a lot of information. There's that. Then also, I love this optic most. Last October, U.S. Treasury Secretary said in September that October 18th, the United States will be broke. And then Biden, who's an actor in the military occupancy, but Biden signs a $2.3 trillion debt ceiling. How did they just come up with $2.3 trillion? Why? Here's another coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. Most people, you'd have to be a certain age or older to remember this, but Donald Rumsfeld stood on TV September the 10th, 2001 and said $2.3 trillion is missing from the Pentagon. The day before, boom, they did what? The deep state, the cabal, they blew up the World Trade Centers. That was not aircrafts hitting that. So what are the odds that $2.3 trillion was missing then and $2.3 trillion was added to the debt ceiling of a bankrupt system? Okay, so we're going to a new system, ladies and gentlemen. You just hang on for the ride. You know, like I said in the pre-show, I just paid $15 for 2 chicken legs and a little thing of mashed potatoes from Popeyes. So, you know, we're not exempt from this. I pay for the same gas and everything. So, you know, we're going to a new system, and it's something to look forward to. Like as she said, we're living in the greatest time period of the world. I mean, of everything. This is the most biblical, monumental, historical 5D chess military occupancy that you could ever see.
Absolutely. And I'd like to add to that real fast, and then we can move on to the next set of questions or the next direction here. The reason we have done this, gentlemen, the way that we have done it, is because we knew the only way to get every last blood dollar was to force them to spend it. And so, like Derek was saying with the $2.3 trillion, they held that in reserve. That was just a slush fund being held somewhere, waiting to be deployed for an emergency situation, which they now find themselves in. So we are continuing to drain this system. Do you see how long this takes? Do you see how long it takes to get every dollar in circulation, every blood currency that's ever been generated around the world accounted for, paid for, brought out of the hidey holes and into the light so that we can have an honest transition to a new reality? That's why this takes so long. This is such an enormous, multidimensional, multi-angular process with all of society. And I know that people get frustrated about that. I get frustrated about that also. But don't let that frustration make you miss the moment. Like Derek said, like we're talking about, this is a glorious time to be alive.
Absolutely. You know, I've been curious about, you know, back in, I think it was 2016, 17, right about in there, there were an ever increasing number of sealed federal indictments. And that number climbed, I think, to somewhere around 300,000 or more. You know, it's just to put that into perspective. I think the average year was no more than a couple of thousand. You know, a busy year was maybe 7,000. So 300,000 was a hell of an anomaly, and that's gone largely unexplained. Any thoughts as to what was going on back then and how that's going to play into or be revealed in the near future?
I'm going to answer that question with a question. Where the heck is Jeff Sessions? Jeff Sessions and John Huber are doing God's work. They are seeing through these indictments in the civilian record in the background so that we can have an honest accounting. We're letting the military do the heavy lifting to handle the emergency before it becomes uncontainable, right? To save humanity. But we still have to establish a civilian chain of custody, if you will, a civilian record that we can pass forward to generations on how we conducted this. I have a sneaky suspicion that a great deal of the taped confessions that we've been promised will have been conducted at the behest of special counsels, Sessions, and Huber. I think we're going to see a lot of movement on those indictments, and I think you're going to see every name that you've ever thought to be a household name for the last 400 years is going to be on those indictments. We're talking about tracing lineages and crime back generations. We are leaving no stone unturned. We are going to get every last one of them and ensure that nothing like this can ever occur again.
Yeah, that brings me to the Godfather 3. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I know Jeff Sessions really well, and yeah, personally, I grew up in his county. I grew up about 10 miles from his hometown, and so I know him personally, and we've spoken since then. And yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna be biblical, monumental, and historical. That's all I can do is just smile on that one. So anyway, I'm not gonna talk about him too much more because we're gonna let him have his moment. But yeah, it's awesome. He's a great guy. He's a great man of God. He's also a great leader. He knows law like the back of his eyelids. Every state, every law, military law, the federal law. I mean, he just knows it like the back of his eyelids. He's a great person.
Yeah, that's the most encouraging thing I've heard in a little while. So that's great. Great news. So that leads into the whole Godfather 3 references that we've seen in Q posts. And I have to think of those indictments when I think of the end of Godfather 3, where everybody gets taken out at the same time. Is that an association that I'm just coming up with in my own imagination, or does that make logical sense?
Q is not famous for overstatements. My anticipation is that we are setting up a simultaneous cascading takedown that will take place within inside a 4-hour period all around the world.
Wow.
I understand that that's a bit crazy to say, but I think that we are dealing with that level of military brilliance on behalf of more than 30 nations. This is a phenomenal operation. I think that moment is coming.
And when you say,
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree too, because we're sitting right here at the end of November, pretty much, right? So we know that the military tribunals will be shown mid 2023. New York Times has already reported that December last year. So we've got to have a lot of rapid fire stuff happen between here to get to there, because in all reality, people here mid 2023, they feel like that's a long way. That's only 6 to 7 months off, considering if it's July or August, whenever they start showing those. So we're not far off at all. And with all the comms that were dropped, once again, Tuesday night, the ones that I picked up on, and I'm sure obviously he got the same ones, but they all point to the tribunals, they point to the law war manual and specific chapters, which we could go over again if you want to on here. But it's very, very specific, and it's very pointing, or however you want to, I mean, whatever words you want to apply there, that shows, hey, this is about to take place very soon. And there has to be something that obviously triggers for the public. See, the military occupancy is back here. So it's like two ways to look at it, in my opinion. Is it, you got the umbrella of the military occupancy, but then you have President Trump, who was put in as a plug for the federal corporation to do what? It's like he said Friday night at his speech. He said, if they're going to investigate me, they have to investigate all presidents, because he took every law and code under their constitution, under their District of Columbia, under their federal corporation, and reversed it on them. So if they're going to investigate him, like he said, well, you got to investigate all presidents, because all he's saying is all I did was take their laws and their codes and reversed it on them. I used their laws for the federal corporation. So it's a brilliant double play. You got the military occupancy, then he was a plug as a president, and then all these other people like Jeff Sessions are plugs, and they're, they all played their part of luring the enemy in, trapping the enemy, and so it's called the art of war. It's another great example of it. So all this thing plays in, so it's a double way to look at it, and it's got to be something that triggers for the people to see, for the people who are not fully tracking on what we're tracking on, and the ones that just refuse to wake up or don't want to wake up, whatever that applies. There has to be something very soon to lead into what you got to see: court martials. You have to be able to see people being arrested, the ones that get arrested. You have to be able to see that in order to get to a tribunal where they're going to show it. Because it's my understanding, along with others that I know, that the tribunals have already taken place. It's just a matter of this is going to be the showing of them, because we're talking about, like I said, but multitude of people. We're not talking about just 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people, 200 people. President Trump said multiple times tens of thousands of criminals will be at Guantanamo. And we know that they added $500 million expansion, new courtrooms and new space to hold that capacity.
I just gotta oh, I just heard myself, sorry. I just gotta say, it's, I was an outdoor ed counselor for at risk youth, and the kids were never supposed to figure us out, right? We had to act different ways to keep them in the program, from figuring us out, so that they would keep doing what they could to help them get to the next level, if you will. What I find so fascinating about Trump is that he can be like the court jester and hold the shiny ball up here. Meanwhile, all this amazing stuff is going on behind the scenes. And I think that's what's going to blow a lot of the normies' minds, because from the mainstream media, they view him in a way that he is this idiot, when it's quite opposite. He's an absolute genius. So, I mean, just that in and of itself is remarkable. And then when the normies realize that they've hated this man that is absolutely helping them, their children, future generations, this country, the military, all of the people who have, the veterans who've died, over the years, that he's putting an end to all that. Can you talk about how significant it's been that he's played these different roles in order for the military to do what it is they do? Derek, start with you, and maybe SG.
Well, yeah, first and foremost, I always bring up the veterans, and I always hate saying being one, but I always put up my memorial bracelet here. It's the same Constitution, the same Uniform Code of Military Justice, the same Title 10 that we swore in under to protect this country, as it outlines in that Title 10. It's very vital to make or allow those veterans that have given their life for this country to lay in rest, not lay in vain. Because if you ever lost the U.S., then all those soldiers who ever died for it would be laying in vain in a different kind of way. They wouldn't in one way, but they would in another if we didn't give our all for them. Everybody. And that's where I'm, being a veteran. I'm not saying you got to be a veteran to be a patriot. I'm not one of those people. But you have to give your all in order to, allow those souls to rest in peace, rest in heroism, not in vain. So you have to fight for it every single day. America is just an ideal on a piece of paper sitting in the Smithsonian. It's something we have to put together every single day. And once we reach that level of sustainability where we can not relax, but we can just keep, our borders secure and everything. President Trump, as the president of the federal corporation, I don't like talking about it from that aspect, because he was doing a job there as a military plug. But from a commander-in-chief standpoint, he's done everything by the letter of the law, everything by the letter of our foundation. I'm an Army veteran, so obviously, I get in with the Marines and everybody. We have our jokes, but we were the first branch, and then you had the first 69 articles of what became military. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, military law, was 16 days later, June 30th, 1775. Donald John Trump, by Commander-in-Chief, has done everything by the letter of our foundation and the letter of what our founders actually intended for this nation. He's done that. And how people cannot see that, it's the same thing I always tell people all the time. I'm from the South. I'm from the Bible Belt. I'm from the Deep South. Okay, but too many people are too busy focused on one person or judging others all the time, when we all have something we're guilty of every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year. We are all, as the Bible says, those without sin cast the first stone. So too many people focus on the wrong things when they need to see the bigger picture. And Donald John Trump, as Commander-in-Chief, has, I don't even, like I said, biblical, monumental, historical are just obviously the three big words, but phenomenal and brilliant is all I can say on his behalf of what he's done for veterans. Also, talking about the quantum system again, bringing this up, what Donald Trump did August 2020. He was at a speech somewhere and he said, hey, if you're a 100% disabled veteran, I'm going to wipe out your student loans and other loans. That was August 2020. In October 2020, I received all my letters from all my creditors that my loans had been wiped out. Okay. The man has kept all his promises. As he said the other night, I kept all my promises. Everything I've ever said is coming true, which a lot of this stuff was set up to once again show you from, it depends on what side you're looking at. Okay, if you know the military occupancy, then you can see that. But if you're still a normie, you don't know what's going on, then you can see that everything he said came to fruition. It also came true. And it's because of what? The military intelligence, the military occupants, the military World Alliance of Generals, and all their knowledge, men and women all over the world put together. So there's two parts to look at that. But there's a prime example. I'm a walking testimony of something he said. And 2 months later, it wasn't like it was a year or 2 years. He had to fight for it. No, he's in control. He's Commander-in-Chief. He's in control. So you have to apply, take out what you think of certain people. There's people who judge me all the time. There's people who judge buddies of mine that are great people. So we have a level of some of that self-entitlement in the U.S. that needs to disappear, and think about military first, because it's all the veterans and all those who have ever paid the price for this country. They came first. That's what's giving you your borders, your security. That's what's giving you your rights to do and be whatever you want to be in this nation. And Commander-in-Chief Trump, I don't call him anything else but that. Commander-in-Chief Trump has done that to the letter of the law and to the letter of humanity.
Thank you for that. We are getting feedback that people want SG to jump in on this, because this is live. So that's very appreciated. And I think part of it too, like when Trump, acts a certain way and then allows the military to do what it is that they do. SG, can you go into, because we look at things like events like JFK and MLK, and they come out and they say these really powerful speeches, and then they end up not alive. So I know that there was a point where Donald Trump said that they were not going to be giving any more specifics on what the military was up to anymore. So SG, can you go into the importance of that, why he can't talk about it, and why it's so hard for people to maybe figure some of this out, the general public?
Well, the point that Derek just made, I think, is where we need to start with that.
Okay.
Donald Trump is a commander-in-chief that is doing everything by the law. He's doing everything by military law. Military law is the period of time that we're living in. We are under, imagine going back 500 years, essentially. This is a period of time where the Constitution of the United States has been placed on pause. It's been placed on pause strategically, very carefully, with a greater goal in mind. It's been pre-lifted in certain areas to allow the military to conduct these sorts of operations, seek and destroy, target identification, etc. All of that has to be represented appropriately by the commander-in-chief, even though the generals are the ones carrying out the orders directly. The commander-in-chief acts right now as the public relations arm for the largest military operation the U.S. military has ever conducted. There's things that he just can't say, folks. I know that that's difficult sometimes. I know that that's tough to swallow. And I know that we'd love to think that Donald Trump would never lie to us, but Donald Trump gives us calculated misdirections all of the time. He's hoping that American patriots are paying close enough attention to understand the need for those types of things in time of war. You can't telegraph your plans. Anything that we say on this call, you can be assured that the deep state is also watching. There are certain things that I simply won't allude to and won't say, and I'm sure Derek's got the same situation in certain areas. This is a gigantic military operation that is being handled by an enormous group of individuals, and Donald Trump is acting as the civilian go-ahead on behalf of the American people. Understand that he has to do the things that he has to do because he is the commander-in-chief and because he is bound by military law, that if he did not do them, he becomes complicit in the operation, and the Donald Trump we all love so much must necessarily go down. Nobody wants that to happen, so he has to be very careful and measured in what he does. And I'm going to turn it over to Derek for any commentary.
Thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, once again, Commander-in-Chief, and it's not a role he said it the other night. He said it very clear Tuesday night. I had a nice life. I didn't need any of this. You have a nice life. He pointed to the crowd. You had a nice life, but we love our country, don't we? That was very specific to say, hey, and it also shows he was a plug because, you know, he didn't run for president under the ways that presidents would run. When you go back and you apply everything he said on the campaign trail 2016, once again, those are things my grandfather and great uncle, who was a Purple Heart at Normandy, those guys in their 90s and that age bracket had heard before. The 200 generals said, never again will we let happen in this country what happened under JFK. That was stuff that was military talk. That was within the military fraternity, if you want to call it that, military only. So, you know, I've had so many hundreds and thousands of emails that's come through from veterans, especially 70 years old and older. Had one this week come in that had worked multiple years in over 100 countries. Also in the DOD section, you know, and he's like, man, you know, saying the same thing. People calling him crazy. But when you apply that 97% of America, 97% of our population are not veterans. So there's 3% out there that are veterans. Then you apply that 1% of our population currently serve in all armed forces. So when you take that 1 to 3 percentile, and then you break down the 1 to 3 percentile that actually went in for the military, for military law, for a greater good than just, hey, I want college paid for, dental, housing, medical, those things. I'm not knocking that. I used my GI Bill as well, but it was a privilege. It was not the reason. It's not your motivation of why you're supposed to serve. So when you apply that, when you take the commander-in-chief, who's the top of all of this hierarchy, all the way down, you know, he's listening to multiple generals, women and men all over the world who have multiple years of experience. So it's not an easy position to be in. And then, yes, he has to use certain things. He has to use comms. You know, that's why code language is really cool. And my mother loves when I tell this story about Jeremiah Denton from Mobile, Alabama. Jeremiah Denton was a prisoner of war with Vietnam. And all of us males sitting here tried to do it. Males, we suck at multitasking. And it's hard for me to even sit here and try this. But here was Jeremiah Denton. Think about this, how God used this man. He, on TV, the one they chose just so happens to be Jeremiah Denton. And he goes, we are receiving water. See, I can't even do it without talking to my blinkage of my eyes, right? He says, we're receiving water, we're receiving food, things of that nature. While he was also double blinking with his eyes in Morse code, the word torture. I mean, think about that. He was talking, we are getting water, and he, at the same time. So when you think of just someone who was, I can't remember what his rank was necessarily, but he wasn't a commander-in-chief. He wasn't a general. He was on probably a sergeant somewhere there. I have to go back and look at his rank. But there's a guy who, he gave us all for his country. He also knew that, hey, I wasn't going to give up any information while he was a POW, but he held it together and he blinked torture. And then the brilliancy of the people on the other side sitting there going, hey, look at his eyes. Look at him. He's blinking torture. He's blinking Morse code. I mean, you think about that right there. Then apply what it's like to be commander-in-chief, one person over the whole military occupancy with world alliance of generals. Sure, you know, the thing is Donald Trump is taking a lot of commands from different people too, because he's asking for them. He's not acting like he's almighty and knows everything. This is a team, and military is nothing but a team.
Alliance.
That's right. It's an alliance. And, you know, I want people to understand that the most, that this is, you know, God and the military, the only two things that matter right now, or whatever you believe in. But, you know, for me, it's God and the military. And military means the whole umbrella and everything being cleaned out down here, the child trafficking, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, all these things are under that military umbrella. And it's a very vital position to be in for him. And, you know, like he said, I didn't need any of this. I had a nice life, but I love my country. I think that was very powerful Tuesday night.
We should talk. I'm going to add a little bit to that, Derek. We should talk a bit about Executive Order 13818. For those out there who are wondering about the character of Donald Trump as the commander-in-chief and the current president, if you will, in the background, this executive order made trafficking and pedophilia and crimes against humanity and children an automatic capital offense punishable only by death. It also gave way to seize essentially everything that these individuals, if they were connected to these sorts of crimes, especially interstate and foreign crimes, this level of depravity, if you could be connected to it in any way, every single thing that you own, including your fingernails, is ours. That particular order was targeted at the Illuminati. That order was targeted at the Epsteins, the Ghislaines, the Huma Abedins. That order was targeted at the Abramoviches, the Rothschilds. That was a direct, we are coming for you at your throat. And so understand then that order literally dealt with nothing else but human child trafficking, crimes against children, crimes against humanity. That's the type of individual that we're dealing with the commander-in-chief. I understand that, you know, the COVID kill shots is a big thorn in the side of a lot of great patriots out there. We've all been affected by them now at this point. I've lost 2 myself, 3 if I count an acquaintance of mine. But that is a part of this military operation to save humanity. And there are unfortunate casualties of war that we have to allow in certain conditions. I wish that I had a better explanation for that. But Donald Trump is a man who wants to save humanity. He took multiple steps in his presidency to do exactly that. One of the first executive orders he signed, February 4th, 2017, began a process for the United States Treasury to return the dollar to an asset-backed currency. He wasted no time getting that ball rolling. This was a coordinated military operation. I personally believe that Donald Trump's first presidency was a coordinated military coup in a lawful civilian structure. It's my understanding that Donald Trump was implored by generals, one of 3 individuals that was interviewed secretly by generals as a possible candidate to oversee the bankruptcy of the United States corporation government. It's my understanding that Donald Trump accepted the mantle, if you will, and that we have lived a coordinated military coup for the last 6 years, and we are continuing to live it up through the end of this year.
You know, this brings up a question, changing gears just a little bit. You know, we talked about the FTX disaster, and this to me was kind of encouraging because it definitely paves the way for a new financial system as a necessity, not just as a perk, but it's an absolute necessity, and it makes it clear to the public exactly why. And that brings me to how that's going to be deployed with regard to NESARA DESARA. NESARA being the legislation that was drafted allegedly by farmers back in the 70s. Do either one of you have anything to say about how you think this might be deployed, or if it's indeed going to be?
If you're referring to NESARA, we are already experiencing portions of NESARA in areas localized around the United States and in larger areas around the world. BRICS is a good example of NESARA. BRICS is the first step in shifting the world to an all level playing field. Donald Trump gave a speech alongside Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2000, I believe it was 18, where he stated that soon, in relation to world currencies and the manipulated currency markets, soon we would all be on a level playing field. NESARA began shortly after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. It really truly began with John F. Kennedy's Executive Order 11110, which ordered the Treasury to begin the process of returning the United States dollar to a silver-backed currency. But the NESARA in its current form began shortly after the Kennedy assassination, and then, like you said, was in the hands of farmers in a legal sense, was tailored throughout the 90s, and President Bill Clinton was forced by Delta Special Forces from the U.S. Army, thank you, Derek, to sign this piece of legislation at gunpoint around 2:30 in the morning. NESARA is why we had 9/11/2001. NESARA is why we've had war for the last 20 years on this rock. It's why we've had such destruction and chaos in Europe and Central and South America. It's why we've had such pilfering of resources over the last 15 years. At certain levels, this deep state is completely stupid. At other levels, they are startlingly clever. They can be surprisingly clever at times. Many of them saw something along the lines of what we're living right now coming. And so they went after areas such as resource mines, raw materials, and commodities, especially in other continents, very hard, trying to essentially scrape the world dry for fear that they would eventually lose control. So understand, everyone, that NESARA was real enough to spook the entire deep state apparatus and cause them to set off an era of near round-the-clock war. They were that afraid of losing control. We were that close. And so at this point in history, we are now even closer because in addition to being set up to let that roll out financially, we also physically have all of them and all of their stuff. I'm going to turn it over to Derek.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not real skilled in the whole like NESARA. I mean, I know it exists, I know what it is, I know all that, but yeah, I just stick to military law and things of that nature, the executive orders, the blueprint of everything that's going on, and then of course, knowing the QFS system and knowing the quantum.gov and knowing that we're moving to whatever it's going to look like. But I was thinking, I was trying to see something real quick. I was looking up another call sign that I saw. I was trying to find it, but we'll come back to it in a minute. But anyways, yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, it just makes perfect sense for the timeline too of everything that we have and knowing what's been going on. Once again, I think that people hear me, and I've been on a lot of different shows, and I watch the comment box, and of course others tell me, don't watch comment box, but I like to watch comment box. But, certain people say, man, you guys talk about the same thing. And I tell people all the time, I mean, once you learn this, it really doesn't change until it changes, right? So every day has a new optic with it. But once you learn that and you learn this blueprint, then you'll see where we are, and you'll be able to have a little bit more hope and not be so despaired of what's been taking place. But I was trying to see if I had anything in the comms about that, what he was saying. He did mention about liquid gold, which I thought was awesome. There about the gold and talking about what SG's talking about there. Our dollar was only as valuable as they were told we were, or it was invaluable. And that was the Nixon shock of 72. I've got a buddy that came into the U.S. Via Special Forces. There you go, SG, Special Forces from Australia. Just to get his citizenship. This is in the 70s, and a brilliant guy. I met him when we were doing our master's degree and at Colorado State once again, and he was 70 years old then, roughly, and he was going back to college. And this guy was a chemist for Chevron for like 30 years as well. And I mean, this guy was, you talking about super brilliant. He's someone I can consider a mentor because he was Special Forces, Army, and then Chevron chemist for 30 plus years, and brilliant guy. He said there was 3 fundamental things that changed America, and that was one of them. Was the Gold Standard Act, and then also the Nixon Shock of 72, and then also the Unified Budget Act. And so, you know, when you apply all those, were long before I was born. So sorry to make y'all feel old tonight, but that was that was long. That was long before I was born. So this, you know, this didn't just start, you know, recently. This didn't just start with Donald John Trump. This didn't just start, you know, in the last 10, 15, 20 years. This has been going on for quite a while. And when people apply to the Organic Act of 1871, I mean, what of all things, like I said, of all things Donald Trump could have talked about Tuesday night, of all things he could have bragged about or didn't talk about. I mean, just think of all the things. Angela Merkel, and then he said, you know, I told her, you know, Germany tried it. Germany tried it. Remember Angela Merkel? Remember her? No one's remembering her right now. He said that very specifically, and the crowd was like, what, you know, even his own crowd the other night was like, what's going on? Like, who's Angela Merkel? Right. And he goes, you know, I told her in history, he said, I gave her a white flag of surrender, a white flag of surrender. She's like, oh, what is this, Donald? You know, and he goes, it's a white flag of surrender. He was like, history shows when you depend on Russia for your energy, it doesn't work well for Germany. He said, just look at the last 150 years. What are the odds? There's a coincidence again. There's that. How many do you need, SG? How many do we need? Right. So 150 years. 150 years of all numbers, 150 years. Well, America became a federal corporation 151 years ago. Organic Act of 1871, Stoutenberg versus Hennett law book. And then also it's in 28 U.S. Code 3002. And then you can go to dccouncil.gov. DC, the District of Columbia, has its own seal, motto, constitution, laws, codes. And that's what they've been applying to people when people realize that these career politicians have done that. But what was really awesome, and I guess I've been so anxious to tell this optic, obviously, with Angela Merkel, but the fact that, you know, it ties it all in, that he's sitting here Tuesday night. He has to be calculated, as SG said, he has to be calculated with what he's saying. And so for those who do know, Angela Merkel, of all people, the 150 years, and it goes a white flag of surrender. Well, if you go look up in the Law of War Manual, Control F, type in white flag of truce, chapter 12, 12.4, it talks about non-hostile negotiations with belligerents. Well, what are the odds that he would say white flag of surrender? Of all things he could have talked about Tuesday night, and he brought that up with the energy disaster and also the 150 years, you know, going into telling you, showing you about the federal corporation, and that he gave Angela Merkel. Well, Angela Merkel cut a deal with whom? Putin, July 2021. So this was just a week before. So why is Donald John Trump giving Angela Merkel a white flag of surrender in 2021? I thought Donald John Trump was civilian Trump. I thought he was a former president. So see, when people sit back and not jump ship, and a lot of people on my page were, that's what I wanted to hear, and I'm like, y'all don't even know who the enemy is. So how can you be jumping ship when you? And I don't say that in a mean way. I don't mean that condescendingly, but it's just like, hey, why are you jumping ship? There were so many beautiful comms that night. That was just one of them. But that one ties into the Law of War Manual. It ties into the military occupancy, and then it ties into the federal corporation, all in one little optic comm. And that was just one of them.
Wow, that's so great that you're sharing that with us, because you know, before you guys jumped on the scene, because we're all relatively new to this, and so I'm wondering if you can guide people, because I'm just going to share part of my awakening story. You know, I watched Out of the Shadows. I watched the Fall of the Cabal. I've listened to Melissa Red Pill the World. She ties things together both biblically and with the stars. I've also listened to LT at And We Know, Scotty Films. And so these guys were part of my awakening. Is there, and then Mary from We the People News. And so are there things that you guys watched? I mean, or you're primarily doing so much research yourself. Are there things that you guys watch that, you know, can help wake people up? I mean, Lewis at Screw Big Gov, he has amazing information and movies that he's done on his website. But where do you guys look for information besides just always researching all day long? If you can care to go into that to help people, because I always like to look at things to back certain things up. Because, if you're just listening to one source, that's one thing. But if you're seeing it 5, 10 different places, it's like, okay, there's a lot more to this. So can you share a little bit of that with us?
I mean, mine's real simple. I mean, I had my dad, Air Force veteran. He's 80 years old. My uncle's Air Force veteran. My grandpa, my great grandpa, my brother, my nephew, all my great uncles. I'm a son of the Confederacy. I'm a son of the Revolution. So I had blessed to have a family that loved the lineage and loved our heritage, but also loved the military and military laws. So I was blessed to have a grandfather who was a connoisseur of understanding your foundation. And then just, I was always the one in school that I hated to be told, if I knew something was a fact, you weren't going to tell me it wasn't. So there was a girl that I had in class. She don't mind if I tell this story, or at least I don't think she does, but she can deal with it. But she embarrassed me in front of all this, it's like, I think it was 10th grade, 11th grade, somewhere in there. Oh, you don't know country music like you think you do. Because I was telling, it was Vince Gill, background vocals for Faith Hill on one of her albums. Oh, that's not Vince Gill. And I'm like, Vince Gill has a pretty recognizable voice. It's not like he's some run-of-the-mill dude. So she embarrassed me. The class made fun of me. And so the next day, I brought the CD sleeve into class, and I slammed it down on front of her page, right on her desk. And I said, read it. What's that say? Vince Gill, read it out loud. And she wouldn't do it, right? So, and I'm like, but I proved a point. I held it up in front of the class because no one really liked me at that particular year in high school. So, I was the nerd and I was the kid. So, but I made sure they knew that Vince Gill was background vocals on that Faith Hill album. So I was always one of those that I knew there had to be facts, but there's some things that are not going to be provable because we didn't live in that era. There's certain things that probably got deleted or burned or something back in that era. The same thing, people do the same thing with the Bible. They take the Bible and say, well, it's missing parts of it. Well, guess what? If there is a God, and I believe there is, I'm pretty sure that he's big enough to give me what I need during this time period, if that's what you believe in. So I've never really been one to watch a whole lot of different things. I was in the military, as I said, and I had a colonel who taught me a lot too. He loved revolutionary history. He'd give you a topic on Monday, and on Friday, he would ask 3 to 5 questions. And it was always just 1 to 2 to 3 of us raising our hand every Friday. And he'd get so pissed that he would slam his hat down, or he'd punch something. He'd punch like a Humvee standing there. He gets so furious saying, man, your history, but look at all these people in this room who might take the ultimate sacrifice for not knowing why they serve. So that was probably the biggest thing that led to me, digging deeper. And that's not just military. That's also understanding the Constitution, understanding how the government works, how our courts work. Just right now, I keep hearing people talk about the Supreme Court. Oh, the Supreme Court's going to overturn the presidency. No, they're not. That's not their jurisdiction. Our Constitution says so. It's just understanding these things and understanding how our system works. You got to just go back to the foundation. You got to go to the bare, simple necessities, and separate all the propaganda and separate all the other stuff. You can rabbit hole once you learn the basic formula. And I don't think it's really that complicated. And I don't mean that condescendingly either. I mean it from the standpoint of, we have a constitution, we have a foundation, our military foundation. You don't have to know every war. You don't have to know the dates of those. You don't have to know those things, but there's an outline of our foundation, and it's not that old, and it's not that difficult to comprehend. Now, I understand in the world of internet now, what do you search and how do you search it? But there's people like me and other people like me who have guidelines to, Constitution and America's foundation, and then I have those documents. So that's kind of me, and I don't knock anybody else's platform, but I haven't used anybody else's platform to get the knowledge I have. It goes back to Einstein. You have a brain, everybody has one, and you don't have to be an attorney to interpret the law. You don't have to be anything of that nature to interpret the law.
Well, you have a beautiful mind, man, because my hat's off to you as you take your hat off.
I got a point of clarification on that with the Supreme Court, because obviously they're not going to make that decision, but and SG, if you could weigh in on this as well. In our last conversation, I expressed a hunch about the Supreme Court ruling to vitiate the last election, not the last election, but the presidential election. Does the Supreme Court play a role in vitiating the election? Would that be where it would be decided, or is that in the realm of military court?
Well, I think something important to highlight there is the Supreme Court can adjudicate civilian affairs, and the Supreme Court can void and vacate elections, but the Supreme Court cannot order a force to remove a sitting president. That has to come from somewhere else, meaning that there must be multiple layers of law at play, and it has to be a situation or a scaffolding where military law has been legally allowed to enter the civilian sector, which, coincidentally, happens to be where we're at. Donald Trump allowed for a lot of that through his executive orders when he activated multiple national emergencies that were failed to be addressed by the other governments the other branches of the government of the United States. We were placed in a situation where the military had access to manage and control national emergencies. And so that is where we've been in. It's an important point to highlight. We have to keep the civilian records. We have to do this the legal way through the civilian courts and have a good paper trail that we can incorporate into history and teach the correct history. But at this point in time, we have a blending of civilian and military justice in both systems, if you will, overseeing sort of the same set of scenarios. And how we play this out optically, I don't know. It's above my understanding. But I know that the Supreme Court will eventually come into this insofar as the election securities and the election integrity of the United States is concerned.
Derek, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I just meant the overall removing of the president. They can't do that. That's what the constitutional process of law means, is that, like the J6 has nothing to do with Trump or Biden. J6 is a constitutional process of counting the votes of presidency. So when you apply, there goes the inside of the occupancy that I'm talking about. So there's two sides to look at it. And like you just said, the executive orders are what's very vital. The executive order 13848, in my opinion, is probably the most important piece of paper since the Declaration of Independence, just because of when and where he signed it. He declared a national emergency and also an election fraud committee inside of it, where he specifically says there's no results of foreign interference. So he's telling you we don't have foreign interference. So that's showing you right there military occupancy, because the national emergency will take precedent over that. National emergency 2 months before the midterm of 2018 and 2 years before the presidential election. A national emergency means there's a threat to the people. There's a threat. And as FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, did in his speech, it's called Wartime Powers of the President. It's also the First War Powers Act of 1941. If you go read that, the president has war powers that he can take to defend the Constitution. It's his responsibility. As FDR told Congress, it's my responsibility. If you don't act, I will. So that's what happened. President Donald John Trump, under the federal corporation, declared 3 national emergencies that Congress did not address. So therefore, he had to take powers, war powers, and also emergency powers, National Emergencies Act, the Stafford Act, and then he federalized the National Guard to active duty. And the only person who can federalize them, according to 10 United States Code 12406, is the president. He's the only one who's done so. And it never ceases to amaze me that I still have a few veterans who trickle through. And I know that focusing on one or two sounds bad, but when it's veterans out there misleading their families and their communities, saying that the National Guard are not in control, they're not in federalization, that's an atrocity to all other veterans, for the fact that, once again, when you raise your right hand, that's Title 10, the same Title 10 that Donald Trump used to federalize. And then he put in 10 U.S. Code Chapter 1209, simultaneous with Executive Order 13912, that he was calling into service 1 million National Guard. to active duty, no more than 24 consecutive months, meaning, hey, I can rotate in and out units. So, to have veterans, I'm like Nick Saban now. I know everybody hates Alabama football, but hey, I did my undergrad there, so y'all can hate us all we want. We sucked this year, so it's okay. So it's fine. You can hate all you want. But Nick Saban said it's the 1 and 2 losses that bother him the most. It's not what do we do in the wins. Yes, you can always learn from those, but you look at those 1 or 2 losses, and to have some veterans out there that say that this ain't happening and that the National Guard can be out of their states. No, they can't. They're state militias until federalized by the president. And President Donald John Trump is the only person who's federalized the National Guard active duty. And also 50 U.S. Code Chapter 34, the only person who can terminate a national emergency is the president, and it will come into a form of an address to the nation. So when you apply all those, and then you apply the fact that this was never about voter fraud from a voter standpoint. That's what people need to understand. How did President Trump know to write executive order with a national emergency with all the language and verbiage in there about maritime law, the jurisdiction, the United States jurisdiction? How did he know to do that 2 years before COVID and 2 years before this presidential election? How did he know? He had to have what? Intelligence, and also his other executive orders on cybersecurity and intelligence and artificial intelligence. Then the QFS. Then breaking down, he eliminated. He abolished the Air Force Space Program, and he created the Independent Space Force Program, which made it its own branch. And then what happened? August this year, Joe Biden has never mentioned the words Space Force out of his mouth, not one time. And then the Army, my beloved Army, and all of the branches transfer all communications to the Space Force under one command. So who's that commander? Well, the one who did what? Issue these national emergencies that Congress did not address, and he's the commander-in-chief. So it's showing you that he schooled the federal corporation, but also the military occupancy allowed him to do so. And so I just think it's really, really brilliant. It's also monumental. I wish I was a part of that. I wish I was, a part of that team still. I wish I was on the front line still. I wish I was one of those, still in service. But I think it's very vital for people to understand that, though, with the commander-in-chief, and then also how this was never about voter fraud from a voter standpoint. This was about the cabal, the deep state, the Washington establishment. They shuffled out the states. That way, there was never one state. There was always just a trigger. So they shuffled out these systems. And President Trump said that. He alluded to that in his president. He said, I don't agree with the word Bernie Sanders says, and I don't agree with the word that Elizabeth Warren says. But he's like, their own party screws them over. So he was alluding to what Lou Dobbs had pointed out in 2006 and 2008, that these electronic voter systems would have implications on future elections. But they didn't mean from your state and your voter standpoint. They were talking about these people who they need money laundering for their genocides and their trafficking. And when people apply that there was no way Donald John Trump did what he did in those 4 years, and all the comms he's dropping, all the coincidences that keeps popping up. There's no way without it being a military occupancy. So I just thought it'd be important to highlight that again about the fact of the voter fraud and also these executive orders.
I'd like to add a little bit to that, going in the direction of Space Force. We are going to learn to appreciate Space Force in a way that none of us have ever appreciated a military branch before, except those who have served. Transferring all things under one command is an enormous marker for the United States military. Understand that from the public facing side, that one command for us is going to be the commander-in-chief, because he's been appointed as a de facto public relations individual for the largest military operation that the United States has ever conducted. But all of those comms internally being channeled under the Space Force means that they're going to be handled through Space Force infrastructure and examined by Space Force personnel, who coincidentally, some of them are portions of the upper echelon of command that oversee weapons of mass destruction, biological terrorism units. These are elite generals who now have control of all information and reconnaissance gathered by the entire armed forces apparatus of the United States. this is a monumental point in this operation. And I think that the reason we've seen such an accelerated chain of events in the last 8 to 12 weeks was because we now had essentially a complete control of information on both sides. And so now it's just a matter of bringing that to the public space.
Excellent.
Well, to add to the, I was going to say, to add to the optics too, to know that the military tribunals are coming. He specifically said Tuesday night, which was, I mean, I got chills when he said it, but he said, well, one, as commander in chief, he's like, as commander in chief, I will get Biden's radical left ideology out of our military. All right. Then he also said some other things that was, he said Nancy Pelosi has been fired. She's on her way to another country right now. And the next day, Wednesday, I get up Wednesday morning and I look on the flight out. And what do I see? I see 2 aircraft leaving Jacksonville, Florida and Miami, Florida with the call signs Gitmo. If Biden was president, ladies and gentlemen, he could take this cheap old hotel pen right here and he could just sign a little thing and he could shut down Gitmo anytime he wanted. Why hasn't he done it? Why did he campaign on that? Why was that such a hot topic? It wasn't inflation. It wasn't taxes. It wasn't anything of that nature. I'm going to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Blah, 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 blah. Why hadn't he done it? Because he can't. He's not even real, first and foremost. He wasn't recognized by the military. He was given a full-grade military funeral service on January 20th by military regulations, by the way. So there's that military thing again. And then also the other one that was very, very bone-chilling to me was he was talking about when he was talking to President Xi of China. And he said, a quick trial, we'll have quick trials. A quick trial meaning we'll have a trial in the morning and execution by end day. That ain't nothing but military tribunal talk, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you another thing that's pretty freaking awesome. When you go read the Military Justice Act of 2016 and you read the first 2 paragraphs, it says even things like this: military personnel cannot plead the 5th. So can you imagine if they got dirt on you? You can't plead the 5th. You're done. If you're captured by the U.S. military and the World Alliance of Generals and the World Alliance of Militaries, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Your ass is grass, basically.
Hey, Derek,
that's the only word I'll say.
I got to respond to your comment about I wish I was part of that team. I think for our viewers and whatnot, you clearly are. And I would say what you're doing is pretty front line. But I have a question for both of you, and I think maybe SG, if you could respond to this first, with regard to continuity of government. When, as I understand it, when we're in a state of emergency, which I guess technically we have been since 9/11, continuity of government kicks in, and then a whole lot of unelected people have a lot more power, and they can do a whole lot more things. How does that play into what we're seeing now, and how is that going to look going into the future?
Gentlemen, continuity of government is the only reason that we still have electricity to have this Zoom call. Continuity of government has been in effect in one form or another since January the 17th of 2017, I believe, when FEMA codified and put into regulation Federal Continuity Directive 1. Federal Continuity Directive 1 is a continuity directive that includes different plans for the Federal Emergency Management Agency to assume and then operate within the confines of in regards to a continuity of government national emergency. One of those continuity of government situations highlighted in FCD1 is devolution. Devolution of government is a decentralizing of the civilian chain of command and essentially suspending the Constitution for a period of time. That doesn't mean that your rights and liberties are suspended. What it means is that the system that is based off of that particular Constitution must be placed in a state of pause so that it can be handled. A continuity of government deals with 8 areas of national critical infrastructure. I don't remember all 8 of them off the top of my head, but utilities, powers, healthcare, access to commerce and trade and transport, things like that are considered essential functions for society. We couldn't just put this entire country into a full stop halt in 2020 when this election fraud occurred for a number of reasons. This is a worldwide operation, number one, first and foremost, and the great crime here is COVID. It's not just election fraud. Election fraud is a byproduct of a much larger, much more sinister crime. Regarding where we've been with continuity of government is a special operation. I mean, this is irregular warfare. Chris Miller stated going out of office as the Secretary of Defense in December of 2020 that we were embarking upon some of the most complex operations in our nation's history. Why would the outgoing Secretary of Defense say something like that? It doesn't make any sense. It does make sense, however, when you piece the puzzles together and you begin looking at the documents placed into action and effect between November 3rd of 2020 and January 19th of 2021. Federal Mission Resilience Executive Order outlined the continuity of government structure, the echelon of command, if you will, for the civilian apparatus that would go into exile. Donald Trump is running that portion of this operation privately. I believe he has a private cabinet. I believe they communicate regularly. I have my suspicions on who may be involved in that, but I can't say exactly who that might be. Regardless, continuity of government placed us in a position where the military had provisional control and essentially limitless authority to do the things that they needed to do to address the national emergency, which included addressing all of these creeps at all levels of society everywhere, from the deep underground military bases all the way to the top of financial CEOs and businesses. This is a complex operation that involves a lot of layers of intelligence and reconnaissance. We have to catch them in their own spider's web, and we've been doing so. I hope that I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I think it's a real good start. That's for sure. Derek, do you have anything to add to that as far as continuity of government goes?
Well, yeah, too. There's, he talked about the Federal Resilience Act. Paralleling with that, the other night there was another column with that. Economic security is national security. All right, and then in the Federal Resilience Act, which happened, passed that December the 7th, 2020. No coincidence on Pearl Harbor's anniversary. There was a lot of comms during his presidency to do with FDR, Pearl Harbor, and then also tying that in, what Joe Biden actually is a Commonwealth Act number 671, which is in our history, where the FDR, once again, 9 days after Pearl Harbor, 9 days after, they plugged a president into the face of the Philippines, while the actual Philippine president was down here, what they call exile, and he had full control of his military. So that's what that was. So there was a lot of comms to do with FDR, also Pearl Harbor, things of that nature. So the PED, there would have been a presidential emergency action document, which I got from some mentors of mine that were higher up. That President Trump would have had to sign a PED on November the 3rd, 2020. As we said, everything has to be documented. When you go read all these orders, you go read all these codes, the president has to keep record, and he has to report certain things at certain times when you go read these orders. And then the Federal Resilience Act, getting back to it though, I mean, what's brilliant about it is that it pairs in comparison, but also has a parallel with the National Security Act of 1947, which did what? Established a national military establishment, which became the Department of Defense, and also it created the Secretary of Defense. So bringing up Christopher Miller there is very vital and important to understand that I think that Christopher Miller is still a part of this. I think that he never left as Secretary of Defense. I think he's the Secretary of Defense under President Trump, and I say that comfortably for the fact of he put him in Executive Order 13919, and he had a very vital role in that order, which I saw where Christopher Miller called in, I think it was 6,200 troops on January 6th for certain things going on. So there was a lot of distractions during January on purpose. The J6 was a distraction because Americans fall for it. Americans love drama more than anybody. I mean, you look at getting a guy with a TV show, got a camera around him, and he gives a girl a rose, right? Well, he's a cool guy. He's a gentleman all of a sudden because he's on camera. But if I had 25 girls in one house, you know what they'd call me. So we Americans love drama, and they fell for it. Nancy Pelosi has no military rank whatsoever. House representative, since when the Speaker of the House had military rank? She don't. She didn't put those troops there in D.C. I heard multiple people saying that. Also, Nancy Pelosi tearing up the speech in February for 2020 State of the Union. The people saw that, but if they'd have heard President Trump say in that speech around minute 40, he was the very first person to ever say the word coronavirus in our history as a threat that we have to deal with. If people have been paying attention to the things that matter, and I don't take coronavirus lightly, I don't, because biochemical warfare is very serious. That's why they put us in gas chambers. And let me tell you, the one and only time I needed to go in the gas chamber, it felt like hell. So, you know, to die that way would be a very awful way to die. And then, so, you know, when you apply all these things, though, and you fast forward up to what would have needed to happen, the PED, and then also the Federal Resilience Act. And then when Donald Trump said Tuesday night, economic security is national security. Well, national security applies in many ways, but it's also in that Federal Resilience Act. So all these things put together, once again, how many coincidences do you need? And how many of these things put together does one need to understand how biblical, monumental, and historical this is? But that's kind of the parallel with that. I mean, yes, a PED requires a COG. Look at all these 1 million National Guard active duty. You know how happy those people are? You know what that does? They're getting paid active duty status. But they'd also be told to keep their freaking mouth shut. They're under oath and they're under an NSA, so their families would have to know, hey, we're getting paid active duty pay all this time period, but you can't go tell anybody or they'll court-martial me too. I mean, this applies to everybody. You can be court-martialed at any rank in the military. So, but I think it's very important to understand what that means. Going from state level to active duty, that means they get paid active status. Who's paying for that? So that's not only active duty already active, that's also adding National Guard to it. So that should show you a cog in itself for the people who don't believe that.
And I'd like to add on to that real fast, Derek, for those individuals out there wondering about COG and where we're at with this. We saw a television broadcast, and I can't remember, but I believe it was January the 17th or January the 19th of 2021. A major general from the United States National Guard went on an interview and stated that we are prepared for a peaceful transition to military power. Those were his exact words. Now, this was a local news station, like a Fox 7 kind of station, but that is an enormous admission, and that is a giant communication. To miss those sorts of things will place patriots in a position where they're wondering what's going on. They're upset, they're scared, they're confused because they're not understanding those coded messages. You have to look hard for these, but we are being asked to do so because we are capable of that.
Well, the thing about that was General Walker. That was an actor that day too, by the way, because his uniform was not the correct uniform on TV that day. But that was General Walker, total different guy, but it's still part of obviously the act. So I thought that was really cool in a different way. It's still part of the COG. It's still part of everything just because he was an actor. But it was still an optic for people, especially veterans out there, that was not the actual General Walker that day. They said it was Major General, 2-star general, but it was actually not him, which is very beautiful. Interesting to me. So
beautiful.
I got a question about these biolabs. There's rumored to be biolabs in Taiwan. We know about the biolabs in Ukraine. They're doing gain of function research allegedly in Boston right now, and God only knows where else. What kind of a threat does this represent? Has it been neutralized? Where do you stand on this? SG, maybe you want to start with this answer.
That operation is ongoing. The biolaboratories, we were able to neutralize a significant number of them between 2016 and 2019. But we were also focusing on the upper echelon of the 13 Phoenician families at that time, and de-weaponizing things like rogue nukes, climate weapons, 5G in certain areas of the world. And so this has kind of been a trickle-down effect of evil, right? We started with the most incomprehensible evil, and we've been working our way through the muck. The biolabs, there's over 320 biolabs, if you want to call them that, around the globe, if you will. Those labs are everything from level 4 bioweapon labs to military grade biomedical research. biopharmaceutical research, molecular geneticism, and more. Those laboratories, many of them, a great deal of them actually funded by the CIA directly, most of the rest of them funded by the globalist syndicate that we all have come to know and appreciate so much. These neutralization operations are still ongoing. We haven't gotten all of them yet. That's part of the reason we're still here, right? Putin has been extraordinarily surgical with what he's been doing in Ukraine, but we have other locations in Eastern Europe that the governments of Belarus, Lithuania, and Latvia have agreed to assist us with in certain optical ways. We have Taiwan known for containing a number of these level 4 bioweapon laboratories, again, with weaponized viruses like rabies, smallpox, and others. And so, as we go through this operation, we're being extraordinarily careful because these buildings in large part are still receiving men at some level, right? Like there are people still going to work. We're trying to operate within the confines of the legal structure of the world right now, because that's what makes us different from them, is doing it all legally. That being said, some good news on that front. It's my understanding, just from a little bit of research I'm doing, that China is very, very close to their full-scale invasion. They are running 24-hour reconnaissance across the South China Sea there with Taiwan. In that area. I believe that's South China Sea, but I'd have to go back and check my geography. Regardless, they're running 24-hour reconnaissance in that area. And it looks to me like they are preparing for a blitzkrieg operation in the dead of night. Now, I don't know when that's going to occur, but we know that Donald Trump has told us now 4 times at his rallies that Taiwan, quote, is next. And so we can be assured that that is coming. It's my understanding that certain trafficking operations and tunnel cleanout operations have actually been ongoing in Taiwan now for about 3 months. But those are deep special operations, red ops, things that you're not going to hear anything from, including me. I don't have any intel on those, just from what I've been able to find on the Tor browser and different pictures that I would never put in front of your viewers.
Right. And you posted a video today on your Rumble about the Getty. As far as deep underground military bases, are you privy to information that, because the video is relatively older. Is there anything you can tell people about where we are with cleaning up the dumps, how close we are to having those eradicated? Please. We'll start with SG.
Well, we've been experiencing earthquakes now up and down the West Coast for a number of months. It's my understanding that these small quakes between 4 and 6.5 are dumb destructions. One of the reasons we left the dumbs after we went in and initially started cleaning them up in late 2017, early 2018, is because we needed to make sure that we got everybody who came back home. We needed to make sure that if the family was away, that we waited long enough for them to return. We also needed to make sure we got these kids out safely. And so that's taken a great deal of time, but a number of the dumbs along both seaboards of the United States have been imploded. It's my understanding that dumbs beneath the Rocky Mountains are actively being worked on, and destruction will be pretty soon. Now, soon could mean days or soon could mean months in this operation. This is a military operation. And so soon is kind of an oxymoron. There really is no timeline, right? It's just when we get to the next phase, we get to the next phase, and then we move on from there. And so, all of these operations have been going on around the world for a number of years. The dumb destruction, I believe, is where we're kind of arriving at and have been at for a number of months now around the world. I'm going to pass it on to Derek if he's got any more to add to that.
Well, yeah, while I was in service, I saw evidence of that. Some of that's still classified for certain things, certain regions. But they are real. Also, June 24, 2018, unless you do understand military and you follow certain pages like some of us do, I get an air defense magazine monthly, and then also military.com. I check in on there all the time. I check out the Army Times, the Military Times, and then also the DoD. But just the military.com alone had an article out June 24, 2018. It said specifically that the Army is investing I think it was $500 million training soldiers for the deep underground military bases. It specifically says that. It actually surprisingly showed a diagram of how we clean a room out. It was showing us how we'd be set up in a tunnel and how you clean out a tunnel, which was very I wouldn't say that alarming in one way, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, man, we're showing people how we're going to actually clean out a tunnel. Those things are real. The other thing that I like to point out for that is the fact that every one of these soldiers running these missions are going to be faced with trauma when they get done with this, PTSD of the things that they see. I don't take child trafficking lightly or human trafficking. I don't think anybody does on this program here, but I'm making highlight to the people out there that, this is stuff that veterans are going to have to live with for the rest of their life. And to take that lightly would be an atrocity for them because of the veteran suicides already horrible as it is. So these things are real. These things are legit. These things are we train for all the time. We talk about it all the time. Military always puts women and children precedent in any situation. The dumbs, people think this stuff is conspiracy theory talk when we're sitting here telling you everything: military law, military regulations, military orders, military optics under the law of war manual, also the Military Justice Act, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, military regulations, which like the Army's handbook, AR 670-1. I mean, we could keep listing handbooks here, but these things are legit. They are real. And I think that people need to take that serious. But as far as the cleaning out goes, yes, it's my understanding that they're working under the Colorado region right now. I know that I was in New Orleans 2 months ago, and I was in a place nowhere near a bridge, nowhere near any form of facet of anything that should be shaking like it was. And I was sitting there and eating, and the earth started moving a little bit. Anybody's ever been around a bomb, you'll know that feeling. It kind of creates like almost a half nausea, half vertigo. You know what you're doing, but you feel this little rumbling in your stomach. It's a little bit different. And it's a unique feeling. So, I knew what was going on down there. And then also we were tracking that on the earthquake map. You can see that. You can see kind of like the density and things of that nature, you can see on their map where it looks like it's going to be a little bit more active than anywhere else. So it was happening. I texted a buddy that day and he was like, dude, it looks like high activity down there. And lo and behold, I'm sitting there when that's happening, a bus rolls up and a bunch of soldiers get off, and the bus said Maritime Academy. So the odds of these things, once again, the coincidences don't just happen. But yeah, that's one thing. And then getting back to Ukraine really quick, I just think it's important to note that let me make you guys feel old again. But in 1992, 1992, I was a kid. That's the last time that Ukraine filed for border registration. And then they broke a treaty in 2018 with Russia, the CIS treaty. So they're trying to say that they're independent, right? Without being independent, they're still dependent on Russia with a lot of things, infrastructure, and also manufacturing of aircraft and different things of that nature. And I think I may be the only one that has this picture. I don't know. So far, I am. But I took a picture the night that President Donald John Trump was plugged as the face of the federal corporation. It was wee hours of the morning, 4:56 a.m. Central Standard Time. I took a picture of President Trump and Putin side by side on Fox News, and it simply read, "Ready for the reset." Reset had single quotes around it, and Putin said, "I'm ready to work with Trump." So everybody out there that still thinks Putin's a bad dude, he's not in this situation. Now, President Trump does use a lot of harsh language around him, but that's for the sleepy side of things. That's for the sleepies. He mentioned the other night in his speech, he actually said, looks like Russia fired 2 missiles. When that broadcast ended, the same broadcast had the Biden topic up. And the bottom line, kind of like what ESPN does when they do their scores on the bottom line said Biden, blah, 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 calls emergency, this, that, and other. And it says something about Russia firing 2 missiles. And then the topic up here with the guy talking says Biden says the missiles unlikely came from Russia. So you got 2 contrasts going on. You got the bottom line, Biden saying that the missiles came from Russia. And then Biden up here on the actual topic says it's unlikely came from Russia. I mean, it's right in front of everybody in a different kind of way. But March the 8th this year, Victoria Nuland, who worked for who? Victoria Nuland worked for the Obama administration with who was the vice president? I think it was Joe Biden. So you have Victoria Nuland under oath saying that there are biochemical labs in China, when the whole last year they said there weren't. Psaki and all his little trolls, all the little actresses and actors said there weren't. And then you got to go back. This is how you find that discernment. In 2014, very vital year in Ukraine, very vital. Obama wrote 3 executive orders protecting the financial interests of Ukraine. Also the same year, guess what also happened? Your taxpayer money paid for your vice president, Joe Biden, to fly over there 7 times in 7 months. Also the same year, they didn't have a presidential election. They plugged a president in Ukraine. So it all adds up, ladies and gentlemen. It all builds up, and like SG said, this has been a plan a lot longer than what people realize. This has been operating 6 and 7 years. This thing's been going on, but it sucks that it has to be played out like this in one way. I get it, but this is so much information between child trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, money laundering, not just in Ukraine, but all these rich families, as we talked about, Phoenicians and all the different people throughout history. This is once again, it's a biblical, monumental, historical operation. It's a massive clean out. I think it's probably classified in the Bible as a Great Awakening.
Wasn't there a CIA sponsored coup in, what was it, 2014 in Ukraine? Or
Correct.
I think they got started in 2013, 2012.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
And that's how we got here.
Quick question. So since it's biblical, my dad passed away 1.5 years ago, and before he died, he said, you need to get right with the man upstairs. And probably the best advice he could ever given me. And my dad was so people know, he's a professional drug dealer, also known as a pharmacist. So I'm wondering for you gentlemen, how has your spirituality grown? I mean, mine has grown immensely. I'm so much at the point where I am a sail and creator is the wind, that I just go with the flow at this point. And what's amazing about that, if I ever doubted that, I mean, it's led me to doing an interview such as this. And so to me, that's pretty profound evidence that something's leading us in the right direction. So maybe SG, I don't know if you've ever struggled with, believing in creator or not, or the doubts that we usually have as human beings, but how has, the depth of evil that we've seen in this world shaped maybe your belief in a higher power?
Well, I'll answer that in 2 ways. First off, how could you be awake and not have a spiritual experience? I don't believe that's possible. I don't believe it's possible for patriots out there, irrespective of your spiritual lens on things, to learn about the travesty of child trafficking and child ritualistic sacrifice and not find a spiritual place. Because you have to go within and ask these deep questions. Like you said, the level of evil out there is ghastly. It is larger than most people are willing to listen to, which is why we still have such an enormous population of normies out there, sleepers. But understanding the nature, I think, of things, if we can look at it this way, maybe, and I'll let Derek chime in here, that level of evil must always have an equivalent or more in the light. And so I think that gives us a very good segue into what is that level of good. And I think that is the source of all creation, the Almighty. Understanding that there is a point from where morality flows, because every human being is natured to care for their young and the young of others. You may not like the screams of the other kids at the fast food restaurant or at the department store, but you certainly wouldn't want to see them hurt. This sort of absolution has to come from a source of light, and that source of light is what I would call the Almighty. And so I'll turn that over to Derek.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, the Bible talks about multiple places that to be of a childlike spirit, so that's why evil goes after God with the child, because that's the biggest part of God's heart. And that's what he commands us to do as people, to love each other and be kind to each other. And I'm guilty every day. I mean, you see me on my shows, I get on my high horse and I'm always like, how can you people not understand? And this, that, and other. And then, and it's not my heart coming at it from a different angle, but I've had some very near death experiences in my life that was very crucial for me. And then, and I'll just tell people right off the bat, November the 8th last year, I was at a spiral down moment in my life. I didn't go viral until August this year. But I was in a place in my life where I had a lot of questions and a lot of doubt. And here I did. I grew up in a South. I grew up in church. I grew up around Christians. I grew up around spirituality. I grew up around some of the greatest role models you could ever have. And of course, I was in the military, and and when I didn't get to serve as long as I wanted to, saw a lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to see, a lot of stuff that actually helps now. But when I got out, I didn't want out. So from 2015, when I got out in January 2015, from that day that I got out, all the way till November this past year, I just was spiraling, and I just couldn't find my feet. I just couldn't find my place. But I had days I didn't even open the blinds. I had days that I couldn't see the next 5 minutes ahead of me. And I don't know what gave me the strength except for that light we're talking about, that knowing that my mom and dad love me, knowing that my grandmother and grandfather and people in my life were Christians, were praying. It was their prayers. And then I had a bad accident that happened to me last November. I had a weird situation with an ATV where I had to call out to God. I had to acknowledge God in a situation to save my life. And after that, I went to a place middle of nowhere, Alabama, in the South, and I said, all right, God, I've done everything my way. I've never tried it your way. And I'll give you my whole life. I'll give you everything, whatever you want me to do. You lead me and I'll go. But it's one of those things. You can't have 99% of your right foot on the Bible and even a little percent over here on a banana peel. Like, you got to give it all to him. And when I gave it all to him in November, and I started doing things that was hindering me, things that was blocking my vision and blocking my thinking. Little did I know. In March, I was in Orlando, Florida. A random lady walks up to me and says, hey, God told me to tell you this. I ain't met this woman a day in my life. She just walks up to me and says, hey, I know you don't want to be here right now. I know you're dealing with some stuff, and God sent me to tell you this, that if you keep hanging on, there's a big light at the end of the tunnel, and it's coming, and he's going to open the floodgates. You have no idea what's about to take place in your life. It's going to change your world. I guess so. All of a sudden I went, I went viral on the video, and, sometimes going viral on video, they die off really quick. Next thing I know, I'm on a tour, 31 states, 31 days. That's how you and I met, all of us met. And, God does work in his way. And that's what I tell people about the military. The military works on their time, not yours, not mine, on their time. Same thing with God. He works on his time, not yours and not mine. And it's like you said, that there's so much, even though you think there's so much darkness, well, there's always so much lightness there on the other side to drown it out. And if you focus on that, and you focus on whatever it is, wherever you are in your life, God can use you as a pillar in your town, your neighborhood, your city, your state, your government, your country, wherever it is, it doesn't matter. You're there for a reason. And that's what it finally clicked to me. And I finally just gave him everything. And I struggle every day. I'm not perfect. I have to watch my language, and I have to watch out when people pull out in front of me, or traffic was horrible. I was in traffic 2 different ways trying to get to home where I could get on the computer screen tonight. And I'm like, I'm never going to eat. And I would go around this way, and then traffic would be stopped that way. And I was looking at my map, and I finally got to eat my Popeyes like 20 minutes before popping here with you. So, it's like, but it wasn't my time, and I still ate. I still got the food down. But God's timing is not our timing. And I think that's very vital for people to understand that God's got this ultimately. And he's guiding and God inspiring a lot of men and women in this alliance. I mean, it's really brilliant, amazing, the time period we're living in. And that's kind of my little story adding on to the bigger picture.
I'd like to close off that little spiritual segment with a reference to the Q drop that discusses the prayer every day in the Oval Office for the Q Patriot Alliance with the Commander-in-Chief. I'm not going to quote the prayer, but the prayer referenced implicitly wisdom and strength from the Almighty, and peace and contentment and peaceful rest for the soul of John F. Kennedy. This is a spiritual operation at the foremost that we could discuss it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, what Scott and I talked before, and like we certainly don't want to be in any way, shape, or form cutting this off, because we could go all night. So we just don't know how long you guys want to go. If we want to tie this up, we're at nearly 2 hours, but I mean, we could keep going. Or
about 5 minutes, gentlemen.
Okay. He said, I think you said you have 5 minutes. Is that right, SG?
Yes, about 5 minutes.
Okay. That being said, first of all, we would love to have you guys back. This has been an absolute honor. At some point, we can discuss that down the road. But SG, is there anything that you want to say in closing for humanity? Because this is going on record, and this may be looked at, down the road. Who knows how long? Maybe eternally. I don't know. But I want to give you the floor to say some words of inspiration for humanity at this point.
Well, my inspiration to you all is that we have enough evidence in, say, circumcisory ways, or circumstantial ways, I think is the word I'm looking for, to understand where we've been and where we're going. The issue is that in being given just enough information to be curious and to go on this awakening journey, we are not given a full picture. And so trust and patience is required. Everyone out there that's been following this awakening, certainly for the last 2 years, is exhausted. I understand that, but keep going. We just had a white flag moment from the Commander-in-Chief. Understand that a white flag moment is what happens before you annihilate the enemy. You give them one single solitary moment to out themselves and to live. It's not a negotiation. It's not a discussion. It's literally you turn yourselves over and unconditionally surrender, and we promise not to kill you yet, all right, before we annihilate you. So we are at that point in this journey, and what happens next can only be exciting. Have a little bit of trust, have a little bit of faith, go outside and appreciate the firmament above. It's a marvelous creation that so few of us really, truly take time to look at. It is a celestial encompassment of our entire realm and other realms too. It is a phenomenal thing to behold, and yet we're robbed of that joy because we're so worried about when we're going to get President 45 back. He's never left. He's coming back publicly. It's no need to worry. Trust the plan. We've got this.
Thank you, SG. Derek, to you.
Well, yeah, same thing, like that's very, it's hard to follow that, but, we do have it all. I think I'm quoting someone there, I think Q, and I'm quoting Commander-in-Chief Trump, and I'm quoting SG there. We have it all. We've caught them all. All crimes and evidence will be displayed to the public in full accordance to the law. I didn't say that. That was Commander-in-Chief Trump said that. And then too, for the people out there that's been a part of this journey, treat it as if you were military. Look, I mean, it ain't easy being in the military. Every single day you have to wake up with the same same attitude, the same momentum, the same everything. You have to go to PT every morning. You have to do, there ain't no, you can go to sick call, but after about 2 or 3 in a row, they're going to be like, hey man, I don't think you're really sick. So there's no sick days, or in the sense of, leaving when you want to, calling home and wanting to go home when you want to in the military every single day. So guess what? You're become a part of that. You're a part of this fight. That's why you don't have to be a veteran to be a patriot. So pat yourself on the back. And also, once again, take a breather every now and then. Go fishing, go hunting, go hiking, go do something. Go hit a random road. One of my guitar players all the time says, hey, man, be sure to hit a pothole every now and then, and also hit a hole in the wall place and get you a burger that's sloppy and ain't healthy for you. Just live life, because guess what? God, if it plays out the way that certain religions believe or whatever, if God wants us out of here, he'll take us out of here. But if he wants us to be here and move forward, guess what? Time's going to move forward. So embrace it. But also, I'll give you some words of advice from the military. Embrace the suck. This sergeant right here, Sergeant Berman, he always used to say, "Hey man, it sucks to suck," So but it didn't mean anything bad. It just meant, hey, look, sometimes some days you're the windshield, some days you're the bug. So and but overall, we got this, and the military occupancy outlines that, the Law and War Manual, the Military Justice Act, all these things align. And, we're in a good position. And like you said, that white flag of surrender means a lot of cool stuff's about to happen. So, and just embrace it, enjoy it, and, and be happy that you're a part of history, that God chose you for this moment in time, for you can tell your kids or your grandkids one day.